Hi, I'm Stuart. Welcome to my channel. Thanks for viewing my video. In this video, I'm going to talk about my first year as a booktuber. Recently, I hit my 1-year anniversary of posting booktube videos. I'm going to talk about what led me to become a booktuber. I'm going to talk about my initial expectations before I started posting videos. I'm going to assess where I am now. I'm going to talk about plans I have going forward. I solicited some questions and I'm going to answer those questions. I'm also going to do my weekly wrap-up at the end of the part where I talk about my 1 year as a booktuber. There's not too much to say there because I didn't read that much this week. Figured I'd combine these in this video. About 3.5 to 4 years ago, we were deep in the heart of the pandemic, and I was watching some live stream concerts because that was the only way I could see concerts because they weren't taking place in person at that time. And also, Barnes & Noble sent emails that had invitations to virtual events that they were doing. I decided to take part in one of those virtual events. It was a virtual interview with the author Cassandra Clare. And so the virtual event started and she was being interviewed by a woman called Emma Books, that's her screen name. And she was actually friends with Cassandra Clare. I followed both of them on Instagram after that, and I followed Emma Books on YouTube. Emma Books was the first booktuber I followed, and I liked her videos. She was quite popular, and that led to me following other booktubers. I didn't very often comment on the videos of these booktubers. I mostly just hit the like button. So a few months before I decided to start my channel, a friend of mine, William, not a booktuber or a YouTuber, but we get together about once a week for breakfast. And he suggested that I might want to, start talking about books on my channel because I might have something to offer. And then, maybe a couple months after that, I was watching a video by Reading This Life at M-J, and she just said that if you want to start a booktube channel, do it. So that was the thing that really got me decided to do it. I got some equipment, a camera, a tripod, microphone. I took a Skillshare class by a man called, I think, Abi Abdullah. He said there's two types of people. There's architects and archaeologists. Architects try to figure out everything before they start. Archaeologists kind of learn as they go, dig deeper and deeper, and don't expect to get it all right up front. In most things, I'm an architect, but I decided to be an archaeologist. So the first video that Ali Abdul suggested something you do is that just on your phone, just take a really short video introducing yourself. That gets you over the hump of the resistance you might have to put yourself out there. And then I just started recording videos. Early on, I was just kind of posting what I was moved to post. I'll just read off some of the early titles of my videos so you get an idea what I was doing. First one, as I said, it was just welcome to my YouTube channel. I did one, my recent book activity, books I read recently, books I'm currently reading, and a recent book haul, my top 10 books of 2023, my top 5 nonfiction books of 2023, and my eyebrow piercing, my most disappointing books of 2023, my 2023 reading stats and my 2024 reading goals, my January reading wrap-up, 40 physical books I want to read in 2024. And there was just kind of went on like that. I did monthly wrap-ups. I did, first tag I did was the I'm So Annoyed Booktube tag, Tag Tuesday, and I looked and I was tagged by Fred. I read by Fred. So I appreciate that from Fred. Then I did the book tag newbie tag, which several people suggested I should do. And then I still went started doing some tags, still monthly wrap-ups, some videos predicting what I was going to do. Then it's like starting on like the week ending 5/25, that was when I arrived at the kind of approach I've been using ever since. I do a weekly wrap-up, generally record on Saturday, release on Sunday for the previous week. And then I do a tag in the middle of the week, even though generally it's tag Tuesday. I normally do mine on Wednesday, release them, record on Tuesday, release on Wednesday. And that's when I kind of arrived at that, the approach I've been taking ever since. Sometimes I do a second tag video if I move to do so. I've done a few videos talking about my musical journey as a fan. I've done 4 of those. That was suggested by Kelly at Books I'm Not Reading. I do want to get back to doing those, but they're a fair amount more work than doing Booktube videos. So that's kind of where I got to where I am now, where I do like a wrap-up and a tag video, sometimes 2 tag videos. One thing I changed as I went along is that for a time, I really scripted my videos, so I was kind of like I would read something, I would look up and say it, and go back, go down, read something, and say it. And this was another thing, input from Kelly at Books I'm Not Reading. She asked in a comment to one of her videos, "Am I having fun?" I realized that I wasn't really having fun so much. It wasn't spontaneous. I was just I was working at it more than I like. And I realized that what I had originally wanted to do and got away from is I wanted to be kind of like I'm having a conversation with a person. Like you're sitting across from a good friend and you're talking about a book with them and you're kind of excited about it. You don't script that out. You're just saying what comes off the top of your head. So after like Kelly said that and I thought about it, since then, for the past maybe few months, I've done it more spontaneously. I don't figure out all the answers. I don't have a copy of my review from Storygraph on a script, which I used to do. And when I do tags, I don't figure out the answers ahead of time. I do them as I go along. And interestingly, not only do I enjoy doing videos more that way, but it's also made it easier to edit, which is kind of strange because if you'd asked me when I was thinking of making this change, I would have probably said, well, yeah, this is probably a good idea, but it's going to take more time editing because with the scripted ones, you figured out what you want to say. But strangely, the spontaneous ones take less editing than the scripted ones. So that's something I'm going to continue to do. One thing I'm kind of on the fence about going forward is do I want to regularly do a 3rd video each week, or do I want to, when I have a topic besides a tag for my 2nd video, do I want to do that instead of a tag and only do 2 videos? One of the reasons I arrived at the format I did, a wrap-up for one and a tag for another, I didn't have enough thoughts on what to do for a 2nd video, but now I do have some thoughts for that, so that's something I'm still considering. I might go to a 3rd video on occasion, or I might, on those occasions when I got something I want to talk about besides doing a tag, do that instead. I'm not sure. Another thing I want to do is that nobody really comments on it, but I just have my kind of door and shelves behind me when I do these videos. That's because the room that I want to eventually film videos on is very cluttered. If anybody watched my tour of my book stacks video, you could see that room. And I didn't mention in that one that I want to do videos in there. I said I wanted to make it a game room, and that was my main focus. But I also want to be able to record videos in there. So I got a better backdrop than I have now. And one thing maybe I should do even before I am able to clear everything out, because there's a lot of books I got to read before I can, and donate to the library before I can clear that room out, is maybe record some videos outside. So they're just a different backdrop. It's kind of getting winter and cold now, so it might not work now, but maybe come warmer weather. That might be something to consider too. Another thing I'm going to consider is maybe just starting to investigate like slight technical upgrades to my channel. maybe do some more Skillshare classes, seeing what suggestions people have. I've never incorporated music in my videos. I know it has to be music that's acceptable for YouTube, but that might be something to consider. Maybe, I don't know, some other technical upgrades. Some people do really good transitions from one segment to another, do some really cool ones. So that may be something I think I wanted to investigate and see, maybe like some technical upgrades, as I've been doing this a year, and might be time to look into that. As far as my expectations go, as I said a little earlier in this video, I didn't plan this whole process out as much as I normally would. I kind of just went with it and figured I'd learn on the fly. I mean, of course, like, we always want like lots of viewers. I mean, I guess I fantasize lots of viewers and subscribers. I guess I fantasize that maybe I'd like have a big channel quick or something like that. I remember thinking, like, really very much a fantasy, but I'd have so many subscribers I get invited to YouTube conferences and be on panels and stuff like that. But that's not something I necessarily really expected to happen. But I am a numbers person. My main reason for doing it was just to talk to people about books. I have friends who read. My sister reads, but either we don't talk about it or we have vastly different tastes. Or one of my best friends, she reads. She loves to read, but due to family and work circumstances, she can't do it that much. So that was my number one purpose for doing it. Just being able to talk to people about books. And I guess part of it was just seeing where it would go. Start doing it and just let it go where it goes. Another thing the man I talked about, Ali Abdul, who did the Skillshare class I took, said that the first 50 videos you do are for you and kind of to learn what you need to do, and nobody's going to watch them anyway, and the next 50 are for your audience. So I kind of took that at heart too. I kind of thought, we'll see where these videos go, and I'm not going to worry too much at first if anybody views them. Which, in fact, from the beginning, there were a few viewers on all my videos. So that was good, encouraging. So I guess I would say that I didn't really have too many expectations, and I have talked to people about books, so met my expectations. And actually I would say they exceeded them, because not only do I talk to people about books, but I've become friends with some people on here, and sometimes the conversations go beyond books. Like, there's some discussion of, say, mental health issues. There's some discussion, although it is about books, but it's also a political topic. There's some discussion about book banning, things like that. So some glimpses into people's personal lives that move beyond books. So I would say that even though I didn't really have a lot in the way of expectations, still, it's gone way beyond just talking to people about books. So I would say my expectations were exceeded. As far as just what the numbers are, I published my first Booktube video on December 8th, 2023. That was the Welcome to my Booktube channel video. This video right now is my 102nd Booktube video. I did publish about 9-10 years ago videos where I took some snippets of musicians, bands, singers at concerts I went to and published them. Published 17 of them, but I got some copyright claims and that made me nervous, so I never did it anymore. Those videos actually, one of those videos has like over 2,000 views, so that's actually my most viewed video. But they didn't get hardly any comments in those videos or reactions. So as far as my Booktube videos go, when I started posting these videos, I had 9 subscribers, and I currently have 212. So I appreciate like everybody who started following me after I started publishing my Booktube videos. My lowest viewed video is my reading wrap-up for the week ending 6/8/2024, which had 10 views. And my highest viewed video was my reading wrap-up for the week ending 10/12/2024 with 533 views. Not sure why that last one got so many views, except that I think that I always, when I do my, at the end of the videos where they have you select, other, if you want to like put links for other videos, and I just default to the YouTube one, and it's like one is most recent and one is best for viewer, and I have a feeling that this one that's most viewed is always going to be considered best for viewer because it's got the most views, and that may be why it keeps getting views. Perfectly happy it does, but it is kind of curious why one video gets like over 500 views, another video gets maybe 20 views, and they're both weekly wrap-ups. I would be deluding myself if I said I wouldn't like more views and more followers, but I am happy with where I am because all my videos generate some discussion, which, as I said, that was my main purpose in doing this. We talk about books, and the other thing is that before I started posting Booktube videos, I didn't often comment on other people's videos. The only person I actually got to know at all before posting Booktube videos was Nix at Nix Reads. And I kind of regret that. I wish that I would have commented more on other people's videos because that's another way to talk about books. And one change too I want to make going forward is that I often censor myself, not because I'm about to say anything bad when I'm thinking of commenting, but just I'm thinking, well, nobody's going to care why I say that. What I'm going to try to do if I have something at all to say is try and when I watch a video, put that comment. Whether it's a booktuber with 100 subscribers, like myself, or 200, whatever, or someone with 100,000. Understanding that the one with 100,000 might not reply or react to my comment, but just try to make that a approach that I'm going to try when I have something to say. I don't always want to just say, hey, great video, although if it's somebody I'm friends with, I'll do that to help their algorithm. But just if I think of something to say, don't censor myself, say it. As I said, it's not like I'm saying insulting stuff. I'm not being a troll. I just stop myself from commenting, and I'm going to try to change that. Now I want to answer the questions that some of my followers kindly submitted, and thanks to you, all of you, for doing so. The first question I got is from Justin at Trumful Reads. He says, my question would be, what do you look for the most when choosing and reading nonfiction books? It varies between the type of book. I like reading memoirs, biographies, and autobiographies. A lot of times I choose that book because I'm interested in the person that the book's about. And in a lot of those cases, but sometimes it'll just catch my eye. I don't even know the person, but I'll read the memoir, biography, autobiography. A lot of them are memoirs in that case because they're fairly early in a person's life, but something just catch my eye and I will buy or borrow the book, and I generally enjoy those books too. So those, for the ones that a lot of times the reason I decide to read one of those is I go onto the Barnes & Noble site and I look at their biography section, and as I said, something just catches my eye and may buy it there, may borrow it from the library. It may be stuck in my head for a while. I just like reading these types of books, and it doesn't take a lot for me to read them. And I'm sure I've been influenced by booktubers too, but mostly it's just going on the Barnes & Noble site and seeing a book catch my eye, or occasionally going to Barnes & Noble itself and a book catches my eye. For nature books, it is a few booktubers that I actually most am influenced by. I often learn about these books and videos by Olive at A Book Olive, Fred at Read by Fred, and Justin himself at Trumful Reads. They say something that piques my interest about these books, and then I get them. Or I put them, I have a spreadsheet I keep that is, if somebody says a book that piques my interest, I listen to the spreadsheet along with the Booktuber who recommended it, so if I do get the book, I will credit them for it. Many I'm not going to get, but when they pique my interest, I do add it to that spreadsheet, and sometimes I do get the books. And I don't think I've ever been disappointed in any of those books that those Booktubers mentioned that I decided to buy or borrow. And for history books, Justin at Trumful Reads, he's my main source. Prior to really following his channel, I did read a few years ago, I read some war books about World War I, a couple about World War I, a couple about World War II, a couple about the Korean War, and I read part of a book about the Vietnam War. So I was reading those history books, but Justin's video made me aware of things like about ancient Greek history, ancient Roman history. And I've got several books that he recommended. I believe I read 3 books about ancient Greek history he recommended. 2 of them were about the ancient games, the Olympics and other games they had. And one was about the intellectuals of the time. So those were all quite interesting books, and those were books that I got an idea about from Justin. There's a book he recommended called Polis that I also got. I've yet to read it. An impressive, a rather hefty book. And Justin also got me interested in something I was not on my radar at all. I mean, history and nature were possibilities, but he got me interested in philosophy. He's trying to go back and read some philosophy books he has in the past, but he's back reading some. And he got me interested in the topic. I bought, I believe, 2 books now that he recommended. And he got me interested in a book that he's not going to read right now because he's going to concentrate on the classics and the Western classics, but he mentioned he might read Asian philosophy at some point. So I got a book that is The Art of War and some other books of classic Asian philosophy. It's a collection. So that's another book I got. Justin didn't recommend it, but the idea that he talked about philosophy books put it in my head, so I got it. Have not read it yet, but I did buy the book. This was a really good question from Justin because he's the answer for more than anybody. More than the nature, the history and philosophy books, not so much the biographies, more autobiographies, those type of books. But very appropriate question for him to ask, so thank you, Justin. I got some questions from Reney at Beyond Books, so thank you for the questions. The first question is, I don't think you ever mentioned what you did for a living. I had a few fairly short jobs coming out of college for the first about 7 years of my working career, but in February 1988 I went to work as a technical writer at Hamilton Standard. Initially my plan was, I was unemployed before I got this job, so I wanted to get a job and then I could maybe move around. Initially my plan was to go in there as a technical writer and transition to being an engineer at some point. I had previously worked mostly engineering jobs, but I did have a little experience technical writing, so I did have some experience to help me get this job. I never did actually, well, at least working for Hamilton, I never did go back to being an engineer. I worked for 18 years at Hamilton as a technical writer. Mostly, I wrote component maintenance manuals and service bulletins for aircraft parts, mainly electronic parts such as electronic engine controls and flight data systems. Did have some experience with mechanical parts such as starters and starter valves. Wrote about them too. In the component maintenance manuals, the instructions are pretty detailed. You have to write quite extensive detail, what's called a theory of operation on the product, and extensive repair instructions, parts list. The manuals can go several hundred pages. Service bulletins are specific repair instructions. There's a specific need found, and you write them so that the airlines, the airports, they can put the modification, the service bulletin, into their aircraft. So I did that for 18 years. Toward the end of it, though, it was kind of moving away from technical writing, and it wasn't something I really wanted to do. It was moving to more, you'd be kind of a supervisory position of other writers or vendors, and it wasn't really something I wanted to do. So I quit that job without actually any backup. I just wanted to get out. So I gave my notice and left. Did stuff for about 7 months. It was kind of a good break. And then a former coworker of mine who is now working at a vendor called Belcan, who vended to Hamilton Sundstrand. It was Hamilton Sundstrand then. There had been a merger. It was Hamilton Standard when I started. Had been a merger, which was a whole other ball of wax and issue when companies merge. Won't get into that, but there's a lot of stress there. But he was the head of the technical writing department for this vendor, Belcan Engineering, and he wanted to hire me for that. So I did go back doing that. So I was back doing technical writing. At first it was only like 3 days a week, like 24 hours, which was great, having long weekends, but I really didn't make enough money. Eventually I went not totally full-time, but more full-time there. So I did that there for about 7 years at Belcan. And then Hamilton terminated the contract for technical writing. Really shouldn't have been able to do that, but since they were the ones paying the bills, so they can kind of do what they want. But then they had some short-term jobs to do what's called import-export engineering. And what that is that you have to, when something is leaving the country, there's a certain levels of security that have to be determined for it. And as the export part of export engineering, that part of it, there's a quite complicated set of rules for that, and you determine the level of security. And the import part of it is when something comes into the country, there's a duty assigned to a lot of items, and you have to complicated rules for that too. So you have to figure like what classification it should be so that the proper duty is assigned. So I did that job for about 3.5 years, worked for some good Hamilton engineers, enjoyed it. But then, as happens before, the Hamilton ended the contract. The people I was working for thought I was great, but the end of the contract. So then there was a few months where I won't say too much about it, but it wasn't very good. I didn't enjoy it. It was highly stressful. I was a lot of anxiety. I wasn't sleeping at night. I'm frankly lucky I didn't die in a car accident. I had so little sleep going to and from work. So one night I was just, again, not sleeping very well, just lying there for hours. And I just decided I couldn't do it anymore. So went into work, composed an email that said I was sick. Went home and I was sick, mentally sick really. And I had previously composed like a resignation letter, explanation. So that was a Thursday and didn't go on Friday. Then Monday was when I decided, am I going to officially resign or not? And I tried to think up a reason to stay and I couldn't. So I was able to log into my email at home. So I just logged in, sent the email, resigned immediately. Kind of a coward's way out, I guess. But at that point, I was not in a good situation. And I just had to get out. I know you're supposed to give your 2 weeks notice, but I just couldn't handle it. It was really deleterious to my mental health. And maybe some point I'll talk about. I've had some mental health issues in my past, problems with depression. So this was more anxiety, but depression kind of creeps into it too. So that's kind of a rather long, I suppose, working history. It worked out well for me in the end, though, because when I retired, and I should say, the resignation letter was a retirement letter. So it worked out well for me, though, because I was able to invest enough and have good results on those investments. And there was a couple of inheritances, too, but I was able to retire at age 59. So it worked out well in the end, but last few months weren't good at that job. I should say I haven't regretted the decision since. I'm happy I retired when I did. And I guess my only regret is that the six and a half years or so since I retired has gone by like warp speed. It's gone by so fast. And when you get up in your mid-60s, all of a sudden it's like you don't want the time to go by that fast. So that's my only regret. I wouldn't want to go way back in time, but I might want to go back to, a little after I retired, because everything's golden when you first retire. Things you do knowing you don't have to go to work the next day, it just makes it that much better. Okay, another question Renee asked. Also, we know you make super cute Woobles, but how did you get into it? Actually, it's because I saw a sponsored ad, or it might have been a sponsored post, probably a sponsored story from the Woobles. I don't know if it took more than one, but I subscribed to their site. I followed their site on Instagram. Of course, if you follow somebody, you're going to start seeing more and more of their ads in their stories. So eventually I decided to get a kit. Actually, I got a set. It was a set of 3. It was a Hello Kitty set. And that didn't go too well. I didn't actually complete any of those sets. Unfortunately, I think I got rid of the yarn, but I have enough new yarn I could try them again. I think I will at some point, because there's a lot of yarn left over these sets. But that was it. And I went back. I did buy another set, and this time I started completing them. And, they don't necessarily look all that great, the earlier ones, and I still got some to learn. There's still need to learn more, but it was basically seeing it on Instagram, the Woobles site, and I was hooked. I mean, I got a bunch more that I bought that I haven't even done yet. I really been hooked by it. It's basically something I didn't know I needed. To do something creative, and I didn't know I needed it. I didn't know I was missing it until I did it. So I'm really glad I started doing it. I don't see myself slowing down anytime soon. And Reney asked another question about the Woobles. What's your favorite one you ever made? That's kind of hard to pick, but I would say it's Jerry the Jellyfish, which is this one. For one thing, I really like the purple color. Yeah, my favorite color is red, but I haven't done any red ones yet. I'm working on a red one now, so that might become my favorite one. But Jerry the Jellyfish. Jerry not only has a good color, but was kind of challenging. Got the 8 legs. I think Jerry came out pretty good. So it is hard to pick, but I choose Jerry the Jellyfish. And Reney asked, are you ready to name a favorite book of 2025? I've read 72 books this year, and of those 72, I rated 12 of them 5 stars. It's kind of hard to pick, but splitting hairs a little bit. But I'm going to say my favorite for the year is Natural Beauty by Ling Ling Wang. It's a contemporary horror story set in the real world. It talks about beauty standards, how Western beauty standards prevail. The protagonist is an Asian American, and there's body horror. It can be a hard book to read, but it's a really effective horror novel. It has a lot of commentary on things, so I really liked it. That's probably going to be my favorite. I will, as we all do on here, I suppose, I will do like a best of 2024 video and a worst, or won't be worst probably, but disappointing books of 2024. I will do that, and I'll finalize that, but certainly this book is one of my favorites, if not the favorite. Thanks, Reney, for those questions. They They really made me think about stuff, which I like. It is good to get my work history out there. People might be interested in that a little bit. So that was a good, they're all good questions. That was a good question to allow me to elaborate on that. Perhaps people might say I elaborated too much. We'll have to see, but it was a good question to elaborate on. The others were good too. The next is I got some questions from Pat at Book Chat with Pat 8668. Thanks for your questions, Pat. First question, you've done some great videos about your music concert history. Would you like to read about music and about bands that you have followed? And if so, do you have any favorite music-related books you can recommend? I do like to read about music and the bands I follow, but I will say this, that I have discovered that I'm not going to sugarcoat it, that some of the rock bands that I grew up loving, some or all of their members are frankly scum. And I won't say too much beyond that, but it's not so much that I felt let down by that, but the reveals of how some of the things they did were really, really upsetting to me. That's not all the books, though. That didn't sour me in reading these books, because I do like them. And I do have some to recommend. First is The Woman in Me by Britney Spears. It's really a hard read because I guess it's pretty well known. Britney Spears had to deal with a long-time conservatorship from her father, and it was almost like when you hear about these things, you just wonder how they could even be legal. But she had a long battle. She did get out of it, but hard read, but a valuable read to see what child stars who become adult stars, what they maybe go through. And I recommend that. Another is Crying in H Mart by Michelle Zauner. Michelle Zauner is the leader of the popular alternative rock band Japanese Breakfast. This book touches on a little, but it's mainly about grieving the loss of her mother. She had a difficult relationship with her mother. It's a situation, not unusual, I guess, where a first-generation immigrant, in this case Asian immigrant, and the second-generation member of that family who's fully raised in this country clash because there's the old ways and the new ways, and that's a big part of it. But so it's grieving the loss of her mother and trying to memorialize her in her own way. So another hard read, but another one I recommend. Another I recommend is Mud Ride by Adam Tapadellin and Steve Turner. This book is really somewhat of a niche book. It's really only for those who liked grunge music and are interested in the history of it. Turner's a member of Mudhoney, a band that's still going, and he was there at Ground Zero, actually before it started. He was there when grunge started, and he knows all the major players like Pearl Jam, Stone Temple Pilots, Soundgarden, all those major players, Hole. I don't know if Hole would be considered grunge, but Hole was because of Courtney Love, some involvement there too. So he knew all those major players. So very good book if you're interested in the history of grunge. Another book I recommend is I'm No Philosopher, But I Got Thoughts. Mini Meditations for Saints, Sinners, and the Rest of Us by Kristen Chenoweth. Kristen Chenoweth is known as a famous Broadway musical singer. And I'm not necessarily a fan. This is an example when I talked previously for one of Justin's questions, that I bought the book, not really a fan. What I knew of her I certainly respected, but just an interesting book. It's somewhat spiritual. It's about her Christianity and how that influences her and things like that. Not preachy though. A very good book. I quite enjoyed it. A couple older books I recommend are Catch a Fire, The Life of Bob Marley by Timothy White. That's a really good biography of Bob Marley. And Final one is No One Here Gets Out Alive by Jerry Hopkins and Danny Sugarman. That's a biography of the Doors, which, as any probably Doors biography, mostly is going to be dominated by Jim Morrison, but those last two books I read a long time ago, so I have to say I don't know how they would hold up now. I don't know how the books would hold up now, but the fact that I remember them after so much time tells you that they did have an impact on me. Next question by Pat is, what inspired and influenced you to start your channel? I talked about this a little before, but I'll repeat it here too. I started watching Booktuber about 3.5 to 4 years ago when I saw a virtual event with Emma Books interviewing Cassandra Clare. So I started subscribing to Emma Books' Booktube channel. That just led to other Booktubers, and I watched for several years. And then a friend of mine, William, mentioned that I might have something to offer Booktube. And then maybe a couple months later, I watched a video by Reading This Life at MJ where she said that if you're thinking about it, just do it. And all those things, the following Booktubers, my friend William, and Reading This Life at M-J, those were the main reasons I started the channel. Well, really, those were the only reasons I started the channel. And next question from Pat is, with regard to the wonderful Woobles that you show, how did you learn to crochet? The Woobles website has videos. When you get the Woobles, they come with this little card, which here shows the Wooble you're making, and on the back of it, I probably shouldn't show it because it does have a code. Not that anybody's necessarily going to see my videos, but on the back of this card, there's a code, and you can go to the Wooble site and you enter that code, and it'll bring up a video. And you can also, for most of your Woobles, you go to the site, and the site has on your account, shows the Woobles you bought, and you can access the video there. And the video is quite extensive. It goes step by step in the process of creating the Wooble. It's and there's also, if you have an issue, there's a help button you can click on to help you resolve that issue. So that's how I learned. I'm still learning. It's just from those videos. And when I get a new one, I still watch the videos. I often fast forward, just kind of go quickly through some of it, click through, but because a lot of it, the early parts I know. Each of these videos on the Wooble site, they start you as a beginner. Except some of the accessories, because then they accept that you have to have experience to get those accessories. But so it's the Woobles, they do a great job with these videos. Not that it's necessarily easy, but the videos go step by step and help you do it. And they also, which is nice too, they have it left-handed and right-handed. As a left-hander, I appreciate that, because I do crochet left-handed. I don't do everything left-handed, as most left-handers. We got to do a lot of stuff right-handed, but crochet I do left-handed. So they provide that option. I had to take a little bit of a break when my camera battery was dying, and it's fortunate I did because I realized that I forgot one of the questions. And Reney at Beyond Books asked, and also I noticed you read a lot of different genres. What would be your favorite? So Storygraph shows that this year, fantasy and contemporary are my two top genres, with 14 books read in each. As I've read 54 fiction books, 14 is 20% of the books I've read. So that shows that I don't have a dominant genre. Those genres make sense. I know I read a lot of fantasy and I read a lot of modern books. I don't really consider, though, contemporary as a genre on the same level as fantasy or romance or genres like that. So I guess I would say that my favorite genre is fantasy, and even though it says fantasy and contemporary equally, But I consider my favorite genre fantasy. But again, it's not a dominant one. It's like many people have, probably most people have a dominant genre, whether it be horror, mysteries, or romances, or fantasy. And I do know, too, I don't need to see the stats to know that I read a lot of fantasy novels. Thanks to Reney for her questions, including this one. So now back to the questions of Pat at Book Chat with Pat8668. She asked, do you do other crafts as well? When I was a kid, I did weaving with plastic lacing tape. And I think it was probably for a Boy Scout merit badge. Not absolutely positive. Not too long ago, I decided to revisit that. I did a little bit of it. Here's an example. This isn't actually anything specific, but it was just to practice doing it. I did like it. Probably won't, at least at this time, go back and doing the weaving with the plastic tape, the plastic lacing tape, because you kind of got to pull tight to get the get it to be set enough, I guess, maybe the expression I should use. And that's kind of a strain on the fingers and wrists. And I'm enjoying crocheting so much that I'm not looking to do something else like that now anyway. Other than that, I remember when as a kid I used to, this might have been for a Boy Scout badge too, but you would take a file and a piece of wood and you would kind of file it down so it's some object you created. I remember specifically creating a fish. But until the crocheting, I really hadn't done anything like this since my youth. I did a few years back. I had an operation with overnight stay in the hospital, and a friend brought a coloring book to me, and I tried a little coloring, but it didn't really stick. It's not really a craft, but I have periods where I play video games, periods where I don't, and I recently started playing video games again. Again, not a craft, but I'm currently playing a game called Monster Heist Ultimate Secrets, which, although a kid's game, is deceptively complex, and there's a lot of depth to it. One thing I should say too about the Woobles is that sometimes you don't know you need something until you have it or start doing it. I didn't know I needed to have something creative until I started doing the Woobles and realized it filled something I need. I just didn't realize I needed it. So it is good that I discovered them. Thanks for your questions, Pat. And now I have some questions from Philip Hall at A Poet Reads to Write. Philip says, my original motivation for entering Booktube as a creator was to find a replacement for attending book festivals. My publisher wanted me to still fulfill my role in the marketing and promotion of my books, but I've been bowled over by the sense of community. What were your motivations for setting up your Booktube channel? Talked about this a little earlier, but it bears repeating here. My number one reason that I started this channel was I want to talk to people about books. I do have people in my life who like to read, but in many cases we don't have the same taste, or for whatever reason we just don't talk about books. So that's the number one reason. And also I was just curious how it would do. And Philip continues on with that question, and how have they changed? They've changed because I don't know as I thought I would become friends with people. I just wanted to talk about books. But I have become friends with some people, which is really cool. And the other thing that's really cool related to becoming friends with people is that I don't know if I realize quite the reach this might have. Like, it's not surprising that I interact with people from the US or Canada or England. That's not surprising, but there's a person from South America, a person from Vietnam, a person from Australia, a person from Colombia, and there's probably some that I don't think of at the moment. That's what is surprising too, the reach of it, that I becoming friends with people from various parts of the world that, if not for YouTube, that would never happen. Probably never see these people face to face, but it's really cool you get to interact on here and become friends. And if I missed your country, I apologize. I don't necessarily know every country of the people I interact with, but the countries I mentioned, I know those countries for those people. And I want to say too that I'm really pleased how welcoming people in this corner of Booktube that I'm in are, and in a sense of community, and that we do discuss things beyond books sometimes, such as health issues, mental illness issues. And although about books, it's not specifically about a book, we sometimes discuss things like book banning. So the discussion has gone beyond books, which is pretty cool. Thank you, Philip, for your questions. I got a question from Marilyn at Marilyn Maya Mendoza. Tell us more about your background and yourself is my question, even though it's a general one. My parents were older than typical for that time when they got married and had kids. My mother was 34 when I was born. My father was 43. Was born in Hartford Hospital in Connecticut. Grew up in a medium-sized town in Connecticut. Younger sister was born a couple years later in 1961, Patricia. Trish is what we call her. Was a quiet kid. I, as a kid, read a lot. I remember during the summers there was a local pond that my parents had a membership in, so we'd go swim there and then come home, and I remember reading and watching some reruns of stuff, but I remember reading a lot, especially on the summer afternoons. Town I grew up in has a pretty good school system. Mostly went okay for me. I got good grades. I did get bullied kind of badly in 7th and 8th grade, but that tailed a lot after that. Did have a effect on me though, later in life. Kind of followed somewhat the typical path. Typical path was, to try to get good grades, specifically in high school, so you can get into good college, get a good degree, get a good career. That's what I did. Was a Cub Scout when I was in grammar school, a Boy Scout when I was in junior high school. Met a couple of friends when I was in Boy Scouts, and a couple earlier in high school. Had a tight core of 5 of us and some peripheral friends. Wasn't really too much for extracurricular activities in school. The only sport I ever did when I was a senior, I did 1 season of cross country. Really enjoyed it, kind of regretted I didn't do more, or I didn't come back in the spring and run track. But I got really good grades and got into the University of Hartford, got an engineering degree. Talked separately about my career path early in this video, so I won't repeat that here. Except that maybe of interest might be that the first job I had out of college was for Northeast Utilities, working at the Millstone 1 nuclear power plant for about 2 years and 9 months. Might be of interest that I worked at a nuclear power plant in their engineering department. As a kid, did kind of the typical stuff with my friends. When I was young, say, went swimming at a local pool. Played like tennis and basketball and football. Those type of things. Attended high school football, basketball games, school dances, things like that. I've talked in my previous video I did about my love of music and how that started, so I won't repeat that here, but one thing I didn't think of that it may have contributed to my love of live music was attending like junior high and high school dances where they had cover bands there. That might have had an impact on it. So as I said, I mentioned in a previous video, or I mentioned earlier in this video, in answer to a previous question, my career path, how I ended up, and all that. So I won't repeat that here. Of note, I guess, though, related to that was latter part of my first job, I kind of fell into a black pit, and I didn't really know what it was at the time. But I ended up in a psychiatric ward for about 3.5 weeks, and turned out that I had deep depression. It's the kind of thing when you first encounter it, you don't know what it is or how to get out of it. I'd quit the job thinking that would take care of the problem, but it didn't. And 3.5 weeks in a psychiatric ward, a few months of weekly visits with a psychiatrist, got me back on path. I won't say too much more about my love of music because I've done this series of videos and I plan to do more detailing my history in that way. Just say that music has been one of the major things in my life. Family was always a big thing for me. My father's family came from Chicopee, Mass. Didn't have any grandparents on that side because, as I said, my father married late. But there were aunts and uncles that were kind of like grandparents that age. So really close relationship with the people there. Unfortunately, because they were older, they gradually passed away. The last of them passed away in 1995. Close relationship with my mother. My mother had 2 sisters. Actually, I should say what my father had. My father's family is a fairly big one. My father had 2 brothers and 4 sisters. And my mother had 2 sisters, really close to them. They lived in the same town as us. Not that Chicopee, Mass was that far away, but which was where most of my father's family was. Or several of them anyways. So family was really important on both sides. We spent a fair amount of time too with our aunts on my mother's side. One of the big things for me was 1975, a couple of my mother's sisters, my aunts on my mother's side, they took us to a hockey game, a Hartford Whalers hockey game. And at the time, the Whalers were in the WHA, and eventually they moved to the NHL. So that was a big part, our going to hockey games with our aunts, my sister, myself. Lasted for maybe 20 years. It kind of tailed at the end because the Whalers were NHL players were kind of becoming more like other athletes, kind of money grubbers. Then, they were kind of more likable. A lot of them were like Canadian farm boys early on, and you could identify them with them more, but they became more like other athletes. But that was a big part of it. Didn't really take vacations over the years. Went to a lot of concerts, a lot of games, the Whalers games. Then in 1994-95, I got season tickets to the UConn women's basketball team. As it happened, that season they won a national championship and continued to be a fan of them since they won 10 more championships. So sports fandom was a big thing for me. In my youth, traditional sports like baseball, basketball, football, hockey. More recently, it's women's basketball. Also, a big thing for me is professional wrestling. That's something I've gone on and off with throughout my life, but something I really like too. That's women's basketball and professional wrestling are like the big sports for me. As I said, I won't talk too much about my music fandom here because I intend to make more videos about that. And you can, if you're interested in my earlier fandom, I usually put the links to those videos in the descriptions of my book videos. All I'll really say is that about that is like, although I really didn't take vacations, around 2010 I started to go a little further afield to concerts, and eventually sometimes I would stay overnight for a day or two, so that was a little bit of a vacation. One benefit of being in Connecticut is you're close to Massachusetts, Rhode Island, New York, and New Jersey. So there's a lot of places you can go if you're willing to deal with the traffic you got to go through to get there. So that was a big part too. That's really tailed off, and again, I'll talk about that sometime later, why that's occurred. But so that was a big part from like the 2010s, going to lots and lots of concerts and a little further afield. For me, further afield is like, say, a 2-hour plus drive. So as I said earlier, in 2018 I retired, and a good part of that I started continued going to concerts, and then COVID came along and that shut everything down. I haven't returned to those remote levels I did before COVID. Not because of COVID, but because of my worries about that, even though it's out there still. But because I just, getting away from crowds, realized that I don't really like crowds so much. And if I go to stuff, I enjoy it, but it's hard to get me going. Plus, I like less and less driving. I was fortunate that when I retired, I had a good amount of resources, and I did bridge a gap. If you retire early, you kind of have to bridge a gap before you get Medicare and Social Security, and I did just start both of them. Start Social Security a little late, a little toward the end of 2023, and I started Medicare February this year. So I was able to bridge the gap. So now, barring, say, economic collapse or something like that, which then all of us would be doomed, I'm in pretty good shape. So now I just want to talk about what my life is like now, so you get an idea of what I do. Like many people, when we get old, we kind of fall into our routines. My routine mostly is, there's kind of a most, not set in stone, but kind of what I do most weeks. On Sunday mornings, I go to a local Subway and I have wouldn't call it breakfast because I don't have eggs, but an early lunch. Generally in the afternoon, I edit my weekly wrap-up. Sometimes I record it, but mostly I edit the weekly wrap-up. Monday, I go to a local mall. I walk, and then if there's a little lounge that I sit and watch people. There's not many people there. The mall's not doing very good. But it is nice to walk there. Then I'll get something to eat, leisurely lunch. Tuesday, I go to a local restaurant called Friendly's. You wouldn't really be familiar with that restaurant unless you're from the East Coast of the U.S., and it's not even in all states on the East Coast. Comfort food, really. Hamburgers, tenders, things of that nature. They have good hard ice cream there. They make good sundaes. Wednesday, generally, I go to a second time at the local mall. Same thing really as on Mondays. I walk, not as long as on Mondays. I walk, I sit in the customer lounge, I get something to eat in the food court. Sometimes I go to Bath and Body Works to get some candles, but that's only when they have a really good sale. Woman who used to work in FYE, who I've become friends with, she works at Bath and Body Works now. She informs me when a sale's upcoming. I get the app and notifications too, but she's a better source for that information. Thursdays, I generally meet a friend for breakfast at a local deli. It's a one-off place, so the name wouldn't mean anything. But they have real good sandwiches, but what makes them somewhat unique is they have a really good bakery. Forgot to say, too, that on Tuesdays, generally on Tuesdays, I record my second video of the week, which is generally a wrap-up, and I edit it on Wednesdays. Sometimes I'll record it and edit on Wednesdays because editing's getting easier for me. But that's generally how I record my second video. A third video, if I do it, would be Thursday, and probably record it and edit it Friday. Or sometimes, as I said, sometimes it might be recorded and edit on Friday. But the third video is not often. And Friday there's another local restaurant I go to, a Italian restaurant for lunch, and a nice Italian restaurant. Trying, because of dietary restrictions, to eat reasonably healthy at these restaurants, but the medication I'm taking seems to be doing really well. I talked about that in previous videos, but I take an injectable for cholesterol and another cholesterol medication too. Just want to say that because it's obvious I go out to eat a lot, but I do try to get as best as possible healthy options at these places and practice portion control, and the levels of stuff, the LDL cholesterol, which is the real concern, it was really low. It was 19 when I last had it checked by my cardiologist. Well, blood test, and he told me the results. Saturday is generally a day at home. It's a day I do laundry. I live with my sister. I should have said that. I live with my sister. We divide our tasks, but she's not physically able to go down the cellar to do the laundry, so I do all the laundry. And I also, Saturday morning, I check like my financial accounts, credit cards, credit monitoring agencies, just to see if anything's amiss on those. Go through accumulated mail, stuff like that. So that's kind of like how my schedule. And the other things I do on days, of course, I read a fair amount. I do my Woobles. I've taken recently to playing video games again. Watch some sports, women's college basketball, some wrestling, sometimes some other sports too. In season like this, I've been watching some Christmas specials. In the Halloween season, I watch Halloween specials. I've pretty much fallen off the cliff as far as going to events. I only went to one event last year. As I said, I'll maybe talk about why at some later point. Nothing drastic. It's just sometimes it's just easier to kind of hang around town and do the things. Be worse if I wasn't going out, and I am going out regularly. I guess the only other thing I want to say is, like, just over the years, you know, as happens when you're 65 like I am, many relatives have been lost along the way, and even I think there's only one, but a friend passed away too. So there's really kind of just me and my sister. Because even though, like, my father's family was big, there wasn't that many kids considering how many. They didn't have too many kids considering how many of them there were. So, and the one or two that we're still aware of, we've kind of lost contact with. So, but I'm comfortable with that. One thing I should say too is that I'm very comfortable with my own company. So when I was going to events like concerts or games and stuff like that, I'm perfectly fine going by myself, which was probably necessary because especially some of the music I went to, it's mostly music that is for, and the fandom is younger people. So kind of have to do it myself if I want to do it. Or I did have to do it myself. Like I said, I've drastically dropped off the cliff with events like that. So hopefully this was a good glimpse of my life, my past and what led up to where I am now and kind of what I do now. Apologies if it dragged on a little long, but hopefully you can see kind of, besides reading, some other stuff in my life. Now I'm just going to give a brief reading wrap up for the week of December 15 through December 21. I didn't read all that much this week, so there's not too much to say. I did read some of A Court of Mist and Fury by Sarah J. Maas. Not really much I can say about. I can't really say much about this book because it's book 2 in the series, but I am enjoying it. I like the world building in it. I like the characters. I'm quite enjoying it, and although I'm about 1/3 through, certainly plan to continue this series to the end and read her other books too. I can see her becoming a definite, like a must-buy author for me. Maybe strange to say off a book and a third, but I really quite am enjoying this. I continue to sporadically read The Complete Tales of H.P. Lovecraft by H.P. Lovecraft. I'm currently reading a short story called The Shunned House. As I'm only partway through the short story, there's not really much that I can say about it, but I am enjoying it. And I was, as often happens with me, there was a period of where I was lying awake at night and knew I wasn't going to go back to sleep for a while, so decided to read a book, and I started reading another book that I already had, and that book is called Playing Possum, How Animals Understand Death by Susanna Monso. This is a book I learned about by Justin at Trumful Reads. Appropriate for me to say this because, as I said earlier, he's one of my main sources for nonfiction books these days. This is interesting that the book is written by a philosopher. So that makes it an interesting take. Not too far in it, so there's not too much I can say about it, but I am really interested in what experts think of how animals do perceive death. Quite an interesting topic to me. Next, I want to talk about a Wooble I'm working on. I showed this photo earlier, but this is the one I'm working on. Tori the Cardinal. This is the one I'm working on, Tori the Cardinal. Not too far in. I'm a good part of the way through the body. This is where I am now on Tori the Cardinal. This is the day 2 of the Advent calendar, which I'm obviously not going to complete it by Christmas because there's 12 days. Some of them are smaller than this, but considering it's the 21st as I record this, I won't be completing these, but that's fine. I'll continue working on them as long as into the new year. Besides that, I watched some Christmas specials on TV. I watched the 2018 animated movie version of The Grinch, which I really like. I watched a Christmas episode from the Kim Possible Disney series, which is kind of a perennial for me. I try to watch every year. I started feeding the birds, putting out bird food. Only feed them during the winter because we don't really want to attract bears, so it's recommended you only feed them during the cold months, even though bears, it's now known they don't hibernate all year. But I started feeding the birds this past Thursday. Birds, squirrels, and occasional chipmunks. And it took a little while. The squirrels glommed onto it quick, but it took a couple of days for the birds. But now we got a fair amount of birds, including birds like cardinals and blue jays and a woodpecker. So it's kind of cool seeing them again. Wish I could feed them all year, but as I said, don't do it because of the bears. And also we have hawks around. Not that hawks aren't active during the winter, but I think it's a net gain for the birds, me feeding them during the winter, even if there might be some predation. So just to sum up my year on Booktuber, I'm really happy where I am. I mean, certainly, it'd be deluding others and myself more than anything if I said, well, I don't care if I get 500 subscribers. I don't care if I get 1,000 subscribers. I kind of like to reach those levels at some point. Not sure I ever will, but I kind of like to. But I'm happy with the amount of engagement I get, the conversations I have with people on my channel and their channels. And some people on their channels, they don't even know I have a Booktube channel. But I'm happy with that. And as I alluded to a bit earlier, if I would change anything about the time I started following Booktubers, it would be to comment on people's videos instead of just hitting the like button. Can't go back, but I'm going to try going forward to do more of that. I don't have any like numerical goals. For instance, like by the end of 2025, I like to have 500 subscribers or something like that. That's the kind of thing. If it happens, it happens. I'm not gonna really say do a lot of rant videos or something like that because that's just not natural to me. I would certainly like to get it. I'm not gonna, like I said, I'm not gonna delude others or myself. I would like to get it, but I'm really happy with my first year on Booktube, where I am, the people I interact with. And I want to thank everybody who subscribed to my channel, views my videos, comments. Thank the people who submitted questions to this video. And if you do celebrate Christmas, I hope you have a wonderful Christmas. If you don't, for whatever reason, be it you're a different religion, you had a loss and you just can't bring yourself to do it, I hope you can find some joy in the day. I hope you have a wonderful reading week, and I hope you have a wonderful week in general. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like, please subscribe, please hit the bell to get notified when I upload future videos.